Good morning. It's September 13, 2024. We're critiquing the local dead tree news in far north Queensland, Australia, and the article on our screen in front of us is titled Pitt Proud of His Record. Now, Curtis Pitt is a retiring Labor state government MP. He's had 15 years in the job, and the occupant of the position prior to him was mostly his father, and Warren Pitt. And Curtis Pitt actually seems to have been missing in action for most of his 15 years in state parliament, but he's now laying claim to projects that many remember as being achieved despite him and not because of him. So in the article, it quotes the largest road infrastructure in far north's history. Well, that was the Cairns Southern Access Road duplication project on the Bruce Highway, and many would argue that it was 20 years overdue compared to equivalent infrastructure in Townsville, our sister city just down the road, and 40 years late compared to Brisbane. And of course, that's Bob Katter's crowning achievement. He's the one that's been going around the campaign trail for years, claiming that as his major win. So can't really be both their major wins, can it? Anyway, so another achievement that Curtis Pitt lays claim to is the deepening of the Cairns Inlet's shipping channel and some improvements to associated infrastructure in the port. Now, for those unfamiliar with Cairns, it's got an old river mouth as an estuary, as a port. It used to be the egress point for the Mulgrave River until some isostatic rebound at the end of the last ice age caused the Mulgrave to be diverted south to join the Russell and come out at Russell Heads. So consequently, the Trinity Inlet acts like a giant silt trap, and it's all this silt that doesn't get to the reef, despite what the alarmists would say to channel our money to themselves via gullible politicians like Curtis Pitt. That means the inlet needs to be regularly dredged, and it had to be dredged 100 years ago when it started to be used as a port, and it's had to be dredged ever since. But of course, the anti-development, anti-humanity Labor Liberal Uni Party didn't really want to continue to dredge the port. They'd prefer it silted up. So there was actually a community group called the Cairns Shipping Development Project, which I was a part of. I played a minor role there, and we regarded Curtis Pitt, whose electorate bounds the other side of the inlet, as more of a blocker and an obstructor than a friend and a facilitator. So it's curious that he laid claim to that as his achievement. And then he goes on to quote the Cairns Convention Centre expansion as being one of his achievements. But the Cairns Convention Centre, if you've seen it, is a particularly ugly building. It was a project that came in late and well over budget. The design of the building is just wildly inappropriate for a high rainfall climate in the wet tropics. The roof has multiple ridges and valleys, and all of those are leak points. If you've ever worked in the construction industry, you'll know what I'm talking about. And the $176 million that was spent for that expansion project didn't even buy a ceiling. When I was there listening to Tucker Carlson talk a couple of months ago, I looked up, and indeed it's the only thing between the audience and the sky is just the sheet metal of the roof. No ceiling, no insulation in the tropics. Yeah, I wouldn't regard that as a particularly high achievement. But then Mr. Pitt goes on to describe 3 budget surpluses as treasurer as being an achievement. But that simply means that his administration was taxing us too much. So why wasn't he advocating for tax cuts? And the article concludes with Pitt mentioning that Pitt was missing in action while serving as Speaker under circumstances where the rest of us would have had to present a medical certificate to explain our absences. But, you know, what politicians are like, they can just take as much time off as they want, and, yeah, nobody bats an eye, really. So the Labor Party, and also the Liberal Party, but the Labor Party in particular, take us for granted, which always reminds me of the weaknesses in our election system. You know, the points where the count can be changed significantly enough to affect the outcome of an election. And that's specifically around the pre-poll ballot storage and transport systems. And indeed, if those weaknesses are being exploited by the Labor Party, it would explain why they always assume that they'll never lose the 4 seats that they control of the 5 in far north Queensland.